My name is John Shoemaker. I'm on the committee that plans the speakers, together with Kurt Grimmer and Joe Hillier and Kevin Green. All of them are here this morning. And together we have Emily Randall and Jesse Young, candidates for the state senate in the 26th district. They are each going to have 3 minutes for opening remarks, and then we'll turn it over to you for questions. And then at the end, they will have 2 minutes for closing remarks. Now, with respect to the questions, there's a lot of people here this morning, and there's bound to be a lot of questions. So let me just go over the ground rules really quickly. The questions should be addressed to both candidates. Do not ask questions that only one candidate can answer. Try not to make your questions too argumentative, and avoid long prefaces or statements. This is not a place for you to give a speech, but for them to give a speech. So if you keep that in mind, I would greatly appreciate that. And then we also have some questions from people who are online, and I will take those questions first before we get into the questions from the audience here. Kurt Grimmer is our timekeeper, and as you can see, he will let you know when you have 1 minute left, 30 seconds, and then there's the double X, which means you're done. Okay, with that, let me turn it over to Emily. She was the winner of the coin toss, and she will have 3 minutes, followed by 3 minutes of Jesse, and then we'll go to questions.
That mic goes to.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I know it's an early event, but it's amazing to see our community show up to support the democratic process. It's really powerful, especially when we look at the numbers of folks who are being engaged in this election cycle. I'm Emily Randall. I'm the state senator here in the 26th district, and I've been serving our community for the last 4 years. I grew up in South Kitsap and trick-or-treated in New Harbor, where the good candy bars were. And have been so honored to get to serve the community that raised me. The community where my family showed to me what hard work looked like, where I learned that we take care of each other when our neighbors are struggling, where I went to great public schools and started my life. Over these last 4 years, we've all been struggling together. There have been so many challenges facing our country and our communities, the pandemic and economic impacts. We've watched neighbors and loved ones get sick, some pass away, and we've kept on taking care of each other. And that's the philosophy that I bring to my work in the legislature. My job is to remove barriers and increase access to opportunity to ensure that every single one of us has the tools that we need to not just survive, but to thrive. And it's not easy work, but it's work that is so fulfilling. My work is also about connecting neighbors and community to each other, to resources, to the political process, so that folks see themselves in their government. And that's why I've spent the last, since 2 days after legislative session ended in March, knocking on our neighbors' doors every day and talking to voters and soon-to-be voters, a lot of young people too, about what's important, what's keeping them up at night, what's challenging them, and what are their hopes for our future. As a team, we've knocked over 16,000 doors, and I've had 2,000 plus conversations with neighbors, and I hear a lot of the same things. That folks want to believe in the promise of tomorrow and believe that when we work together, we can build towards that promise. Folks are tired of division, they're tired of extremist rhetoric, they're tired of political parties that look like they can't problem solve together. And over these last 4 years, I have been so proud to get to work alongside my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, in both chambers, to build towards solutions for infrastructure, healthcare access, for affordability, pathways to college and career and apprenticeships. And if you re-elect me, I'll keep working just like that to continue serving our neighbors. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It is good to see everyone out and about. We missed this last campaign cycle, so I'm very glad to see all of you here today. My name is Jesse Young. Many of you know me, of course. I've been serving you as your representative for 9 years. It's been a pleasure to do so. I came into politics for one major reason, and that was I wanted to make sure that my kids had opportunity. I wanted to make sure that your kids had opportunity. Interestingly, those of you that have known me over the years have known that I grew up home in Tacoma. I remember walking to school in the morning on the streets of Hilltop or the streets of Shalishan. I remember taking the public bus system to school in the morning. And I have to tell you that never in my life did I ever have the fear, even as a child, of being accosted or having my physical health, the health of my brother, vandalized, assaulted, hurt, even on the streets of Tacoma, than I have this year. There are major differences in this campaign cycle that you're going to see, and we're going to expose them today. The fact of the matter is, on this campaign cycle, my staff has been assaulted. My 82-year-old staffer has been assaulted 3 times this year, just because of the political opinions on the post. My child right here in Lucinda was assaulted in her truck the same day that I was assaulted in Gig Harbor, over at the Olympic overpass. Someone coming off the street on a bike, riding right up to me in the middle of the intersection, trying to bust through my driver's side window. My wife and I have been knocking on lots of doors with our kids. My wife has been yelled at. She has been exposed to on the streets, and we've been threatened. I ran because I wanted my kids to have an opportunity. And folks, if we don't have law and order in this country, if we don't have safety, opportunity will dwindle for our children. Period. In the entire time I've served, I have accumulated for you and tried to demonstrate bipartisan leadership. Statistically, I have the most bipartisan voting record in Olympia. I also, and you can fact check that at WashingtonVotes.org. There's a little button you can check out there and say, how many times does the member that you're looking at vote against the majority of their own party? You know, I was once a very strong Democrat because growing up I thought that the Democrat Party was the one who was going to take care of me as a poor child. Long story short, moved away, go to Notre Dame, come back, start a career in Silicon Valley, and when I moved back, all my poor friends were still poor. And I realized, I'm waiting for that to close down, give me a couple seconds here. Thanks. I realized that something's got to change if we're going to carve out a future for our kids. And it starts with public safety. You shouldn't have to fear when your spouse goes to the store in the morning or when your kid waits at the school bus stop. You shouldn't have to fear for your safety. And as your next state senator, my #1 priority will be to make sure that opportunity exists because you're safe to go pursue that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Before we take questions from the audience, we have a question from the Chamber's Public Affairs Forum, the Governmental Relations Committee. The question is, how do you specifically intend to support the Gig Harbor/Key Peninsula area business community? And Jesse, we'll start with you.
Well, the first thing I'll do as your state senator is I'm going to remove the impending 49-cent increase in your gas tax. That's coming.
2 minutes.
2 minutes per question? Okay, thank you. So it's very interesting, you know, in the time that I have served you, I have developed a reputation even as a minority member of being one of the people that dives in and has the skill to dive into your budgets. I've written balanced budgets for you. I've lowered your taxes even from the minority. And of course, one of the biggest wins that I ever had for you was putting the cap on the Tacoma Bridge. The cap on the Narrows Bridge, of course, stopped your tolls from going up, and the projections by the Transportation Commission, if we hadn't done that, and I came in starting in 2014, your tolls would be over 10 cents right now. Unfortunately, my opponent removed that cap this year in her legislation. She removed the cap. Now, The way that she paid for this quote-unquote 75-cent decrease in your tolls, which will save a 5-day-a-week commuter only $195 a year, was that she voted to preempt or to, after the election, target a gas tax increase that will strike in January, raising your taxes 49 cents a gallon. That's unheard of in an economy like this where people are struggling to make ends meet. And regardless of whether or not you pay or you go across the bridge, that 49-cent gas tax increase is going to cost you nearly $600 a year, regardless, just based off of driving today by the Department of Transportation. That's the wrong way to go for our district. If you want to see the economy going, you're going to make it easier for businesses to start up. I will immediately begin fighting for, and I've already been doing it for you, as a member of there's only 8 select members of the tax structure work group in this state. Earlier this year in March, we killed any further consideration of income tax, and we are now pursuing changes to the B&O tax law that will remove the gross taxing on businesses that can afford to start up in iron working.
Thank you. So, I listen to neighbors every day, neighbors in the Keith Peninsula and Cape Harper, business owners, folks who are commuting to work. And what I hear over and over is folks are having a hard time. Our neighbors are struggling. And one of the things that came up over and over for me over these last 4 years from our community was the bridge tolls were going up too fast. That last increase we saw last year that was part of the previous negotiations on capping the tolls hit our neighbors hard. And whether or not, it's $100 or $200 a month, for one person traveling back and forth, for a family that has to travel, for folks who are living on a tight margin, it makes a difference. And so when I had the opportunity to work to lower these bridge tolls this year, not by a gas tax increase, but by a $130 million transfer from the operating budget, which is the first time that the operating budget has really put some skin into the game of the transportation budget, I took it. I knew that our neighbors needed that relief. Now, I started with a bill that would have done away with the tolls completely, but I couldn't get the votes for $700 million. And, we'll keep coming back to try and make sure that we're investing in our communities. But that relief was important. And it's relief that I had to fight against a lot of my fellow members for, a lot of Democrats who thought that if we're going to invest in transportation, we should be investing only in new projects. And I knew that this would make a difference for our community. I also hear from neighbors who want more reliable public transportation, who can't afford to drive a car or can't afford to be, for everyone in their family to drive a car to commute, who need reliable options. And we're going to keep working on that. But I've also worked to increase the B&O tax exemption for so many small businesses across the state. I've worked to enact a warehouse and manufacturing tax credit that the governor vetoed, so I'll keep fighting for you, whether it's against my party or with.
Our next question comes from online, and it's from Chief Busey. It's a 2-part question. He says, how would you intend to address, 1, the Blake decision concerning possession of drugs, and 2, the restrictions imposed on police pursuits? Emily, start with you.
Well, I want to thank Chief Busey for that question. We had a chance to talk about this on Monday, actually, when I went into the station and for a good conversation with him and the mayor, and then went on a 12-hour ride-along with Sergeant John. It's my 3rd ride-along of this summer with different law enforcement agencies in the community, and I've got a chance to see up close and personal and hear directly from officers about what the particular challenges are that they're facing. And I know that the police accountability measures that we passed in 2021 in response to national and local uprisings of community who had lost some of their trusted relationship with our community caretakers, that those were a challenge to implement, and the one-size-fits-all measure didn't take into account some of the nuances that some of our communities and our law enforcement officers are facing. I'm a proud sister and cousin and granddaughter of a first responder. My cousin's the first woman sheriff of Salt Lake County, Utah, so listening to our first responders is incredibly important to me. That's why I've been doing the work, going along on ride-alongs and talking to law enforcement across the state about solutions. I think we'll continue to have discussions about pursuit, and it's important to me that I bring the voice of a rural community that doesn't have traffic cameras that we can pursue by throughout our entire district, as some of our neighbors in Seattle do. I also think it's really important that we address the Band-Aid that we had to put on the Blake Supreme Court decision that came down in the middle of legislative session with no warning to legislators. Our drug laws were thrown out, and we worked as quickly as possible to get a solution that we had the votes for. I think it's clear that it wasn't the right fix. There are task forces that are working and a lot of suggestions that are developing, and I look forward to finding a solution next session that certainly treats substance use disorder like a public health crisis, but also has real accountability measures to ensure that folks can get the access to treatment that they need, so our officers are not dealing with the same folks over and over again.
Folks, I've always led with transparency. I've always held the most amount of in-person town hall meetings in the district because I believe that you deserve real answers and transparent answers to the questions that you're given. Notice that no answer was given as to whether or not Senator Randall agrees with making crime illegal again or making hard drug possession illegal again, because she does not. With regard to the Blake decision that legalized the possession of hard drugs, crack, meth, heroin, all the opioids, fentanyl, she did not make a stance that said she agrees with making those illegal again. And I know she doesn't because I wrote the bill to change back the law that was changed by the Supreme Court. And she refused to sponsor it. Crime needs to be illegal again, and she does not support it. We need to make sure that our kids are safe. If you haven't read the news recently, with all the fentanyl coming up, a little pill that big will kill your child if they take it. And they're selling them like Skittles on the street. More importantly, when we get to the pursuit bill, I remember well, so does Senator Randall, how many times Chief Busey, all of our sheriffs, all of our chiefs of police emailed us, begged us to please restore police pursuit. And Senator Randall pretended like she wanted to. She sponsored a bill to restore it. She voted to restore pursuit. The bill came over to the House, and then one of her colleagues in the House acknowledged that it was never meant to come out of the House. Yet we worked bipartisanly, and we passed her bill out of the House, sent it to the Senate, and then she killed her own bill. When we needed Senator Randall the most, with 2 days left before session, she walked away from us. For the first time in 10 years, I saw a legislator take an unexcused absence. You can see the video. She was on the floor of the Senate. They brought this bill up, and she walked off the floor and killed the bill with a procedural maneuver that would restore police pursuit. When we needed a
Next
question.
question.
Yes, this is a very new issue, but how do you feel about having the international airport be at Brampton Airport at this time?
So I guess I'll repeat the question, just so everybody can hear it. The question was, how do we feel about Kirk? Don't count that again, please. How do we feel about the international airport being relocated at Brampton? Yeah, at this time.
I mean, that's a big issue. and-
Yeah.
That's not a big deal.
Okay. So it is a big issue. I mean, many of you probably read the papers when they were even considering. I'm gonna wait for the phone. Folks might want to check your phones. Okay, so it is a big issue. Many of you have read that they also had at one point in time considered the Tacoma Narrows Airport for that. I never thought that that was a serious consideration. It was unfortunate that they let it linger and cause a bunch of concern in the community. We don't have the infrastructure for that to be an international airport right now. If we're going to expand and try to bring in more international growth into this state for industry support, for job growth, then you have to, quote unquote, dig the well before you need the water. And in this case, the well that you need to support infrastructure like that would be the roads that we need. Unfortunately, under the budgets that Senator Randall's voting on, they're getting more bike pathways and walkways into our roads. The fact of the matter is, Senator Randall came out and said that she was going to Yeah, it's very interesting. On the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, she said that her first bill was to pay off the bridge, which you cannot legally do. She should have known that. She serves on transportation. And then I would ask the question, if you didn't have the votes up front to get the bill passed, then why'd you bring it up at all? And waste our valuable time in Olympia? I've never done that for you. I've only delivered results. The first thing that you want to do is you have to increase Gorst. She'll tell you that she got $75 million for Gorst. Folks, at the beginning of this session last December, we had a deal, bipartisanly struck, to bring $450 million to expand Gorst, which would start to build out the infrastructure. But Senator Randall scuttled it when she came out and announced that she was going to try to pay off the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, which would have cost about $800 million. And then she couldn't deliver it. As a result, we got a $75 million project that over 16 years studies the infrastructure of Gorst and never puts a shovel in the ground. We are never going to have an international airport out here at all if we don't build out the infrastructure. And if we're going to build out the infrastructure, then it needs to be done in the right way that does not impact the communities and the type of rural lifestyle that a lot of people become accustomed to.
Yeah.
For the question. So for folks who haven't been following, CTAC is about at capacity. And there is currently work happening to try and identify what the best additional alternative is to expand aviation access across the state. There are a number of airports in the running, including some east of the mountains, and Bremerton is on the list of places that they're considering. I also have concerns about the infrastructure and the ability for an investment like that to not drastically change the quality of life, the traffic that we're already seeing grow and dealing with. But I do think it's important that we explore whether this is the right fit for our community and match it with investments in infrastructure. Now, I don't know what bipartisan deal Representative Young was talking about $450 million to pay off Gorst. I have been on the transportation negotiating team for the Senate, and that was never on the table. But we did work hard to secure $75 million for that corridor. And while it is study and planning and land acquisition, those are important first steps. Gorst is a unique corridor that has sacred tribal lands, that has fishing rights to deal with, that has a unique geology. And that money includes consultation with the state geologist and planning and design, not just for a band-aid, but for a solution for the future. Not only a corridor filled with bike paths, but one that allows the thousands of cars that travel to our biggest employer in the region, Puget Sound Naval Shipyard and Naval Base Kitsap, to travel safely, but also includes bicycle infrastructure, rapid transit possibilities. We need to be planning for not just tomorrow and not just the next year, but years down the line, the way that our communities will travel. We have to do that, otherwise we're just going to keep having to come back.
The question is of the sex education law for our elementary schools, and do you support it?
All right. So the question was, what's my impression of the comprehensive sexual health education curriculum, and do I support it? I'll be really transparent, because you can see my voting record. I voted for the comprehensive sexual health education bill, and I did so after many conversations with students, parents, educators, and our administrators who told us that the comprehensive sexual health education bill wouldn't dramatically change their sexual health curriculum in our schools. Now, the asker also mentioned elementary school curriculum, and the comprehensive sexual health education policy doesn't include elementary school students. That's an additional policy around social emotional learning. And that curriculum is designed to prevent sexual abuse, to teach kids the accurate language, to develop good touch, bad touch, understand healthy relationships. And when I talked to prosecutors, what I heard was that often children who have been sexually assaulted come and use cute, family-friendly language, and that's why we're talking about actual scientific body part language, so that no prosecutor is unable to find a path towards prosecution and conviction for sexual assault because a kid is able to clearly tell them what happened. We're talking about ensuring that our young people have autonomy over their bodies and are able to live healthy lives. And when it's age appropriate, then we bring in the comprehensive sexual health curriculum, and we know that's important. And as a graduate of local schools, I know that when I was in high school, didn't have comprehensive sexual health education, and I had classmates who got pregnant and didn't know why. I had classmates who didn't have the luxury of having a family who would talk to them, frankly and honestly, about sexual health, and so their classroom was the only place that they could learn that. Now, do I wish we all had families that were able to have those conversations like mine? Yes, but our schools need to be there too.
Make no mistake, this issue is more than just about graphic sex education. It's about parental rights. Parents deserve and should be encouraged to be part of the solution for educating their kids. We should be actively attempting to involve them more in their children's education, which is why I'm a strong believer in school choice. Now, Senator Randall said she was going to be transparent, and then she just wasn't. What she didn't tell you was that she sponsored the bill. She sponsored the bill. And she says she knocks on lots of doors. She says she talked to parents. Folks, when we debated this bill on the floor of the House, which they conveniently passed at 2:30 in the morning because they didn't want news coverage of it. Obligated TVW.org, our public broadcasting partner, was forced. We're not allowed these props on the floor. I can't hold up this phone and make a point to you or to the speaker when I'm not talking on the floor. So the only thing we were allowed to do was simply quote from the education curriculum that she was passing in that bill in our testimony on the floor. And you know what TVW had to do based off of federal broadcasting regulations? They had to put a disclaimer, viewer and content warnings on the disclaimer because of the graphic sex education that was being taught as a result of her bill. It's more than just health. They're teaching and they're showing pictures, graphic pictures of sexual acts, and they're teaching these kids, and they are not including the parents. Fact of the matter is, if you want to engage your children, you should be engaging parents. You shouldn't be hiding the curriculum from them.
That's right.
More importantly, do you know that right now, under the laws that she has passed, they don't have to engage you at all. If some child is accused of doing something wrong in school, they can interrogate your child without your consent and your knowledge, without your lawyer being present. That's the same, that's a build-on from this attack on parental rights that Senator Randall continues to pursue. I will always support parental rights.
I'll change course just a little bit, back to transportation stuff. Purdy is a hub for the school district, for the buses, for access to the Key Peninsula. For many years, we've been trying to get improvements to Highway 302 in that area down there. There are some simple solutions that could relieve a lot of that traffic that are not being pursued. So what would you do to help us relieve some of that traffic and move forward on 302 regardless?
All right, thank you, Chuck. So the question was about, give me a second as I recap this, everybody can hear that. Transportation solutions down on the Key Peninsula with regard to Highway 302, what can we do? There have been studies in the past. So that's the question we're answering right now. I appreciate that question because it dovetails into the question that we just discussed about abortion and broader transportation. Senator Randall said that we needed a 16-year study before we even begin to consider fixing doors. Folks, the studies have already been done. Do you know that there were 12 studies done before I even became a legislator on fixing Highway 302? And I considered it part of my job to bone up on all that homework and figure that stuff out. Senator Randall hasn't read them. If you want a regional transportation plan, then what you do is you either go through the 144th Street corridor off of Highway 16 and go right along the power lines, or you could consider an alternative route in Kitsap County through the Pine Street corridor. And you would dovetail into projects that are already coming. Folks, we have a Belfair bypass that was funded a number of years ago, about 7 years ago. That Belfair bypass is building a loop to the east side of the Belfair that would connect with Lake Flora Road just south of the Kitsap Airport that, sir, you asked a question about. That infrastructure would then take and expand Highway 3, and we should be building right now corridors into, or as an alternative to, or expanding 302 to tie into the Belfair bypass that is coming. And what that would do is it would provide a major relief of congestion on Gorse because you would provide a relief valve south of the ski, the South Kitsap industrial area that is part of the airport. That study's already been done. We've already started to build that and we're ground shovel ready. But instead we got $75 million to study it again for 16 years with nothing getting done. Folks, it took them 20 years just to fix the I-5 Highway 16 corridor interchange. That's not the type of results I came in office to deliver for you. Unfortunately, that's what the majority party continues to give us. So the real solutions are to create that relief valve through that corridor which solves all of the major infrastructure down on the Key Peninsula at the same time of chipping off another tick mark on fixing Gorse by relieving congestion. Thank you.
So I'll start by saying that I agree that we need to solve the 302 traffic challenge and that there are previously studied and suggested solutions. I think it's important that we work at the legislature, with our county partners, with our local leaders to ensure that we get the funding from every single area that we can, whether that's federal, state, or local, to solve this problem. What I do want to disagree with respectfully, is every transportation package, a big transportation infrastructure package, is 15 or 16 years. That's how we've done it in the legislature. I was on the negotiating team for this one, and the money is phased in $17 million over a period of time. This one is 16 years. What hasn't happened yet is aging and phasing for these projects. Now that took me a while to figure out what that meant, but we now have the opportunity to work together to advocate for our projects to be earlier in the process, earlier funded, earlier dollars spent, earlier work done. We'll be in competition with colleagues around the state, including along the I-5 corridor, to make sure that our projects get aged and phased sooner. And my position in leadership in the Senate and on the Transportation Committee and on the negotiating team allows me great opportunity to advocate for those projects to be faster. That's just the way that transportation infrastructure projects have always worked. But back to Purdy, we need to keep advocating to make sure we have this solution. And I've read the studies that Representative Young mentioned. I know the alternatives that exist, and I have been talking to some landowners who own easement, who would be interested in donating or selling at a low cost to the state to make sure that we have the land that we need to acquire to build these solutions. So I think we're on the right track, and I'll keep fighting to make sure that our traffic needs are met here on the peninsula.
Thank you. I want to ask a question about our democracy and voting. What is your view on the integrity of mail-in voting versus in-person voting?
My view, so everybody hear the question?
No.
Okay, so Kirk, give me a second. Okay, so the question was, what is my view on mail-in voting versus in-person?
The integrity of mail-in voting.
The integrity of mail-in voting and in-person voting. Folks, I believe that we need to make voting as easy as possible and legal as possible at the same time. That's why I have a strong record of increasing and diversifying our options for voting access. I told you when we started this session, or this forum this morning, that I have the most bipartisan voting record. One of those was actually with one of our colleagues in the 23rd District, Democrat Representative Tara Simmons, that expanding voting rights, because I believe in supporting individual liberty to felons that are getting out of jail. I believe they have a right, and they should have that ability to exercise their ability to vote. The only Republican to do so, because I believe in voter access. Now, I've done many audits in my life. I'm an IT professional in my private sector career. I've done many audits. And I can tell you, we do not have a voting counting problem in this state. Our vote counting systems consistently add up every time when you do a hand recount. We don't have a problem with that. Our systems are secure that way. But what we don't have is greater access. We should be diversifying our access to the ability for everyone to vote. And the left continues to fight against restoring any opportunity to vote in person. Folks, what are you going to do to vote if our systems go down during the time of voting? What if you can't get access to your mail-in vote? What if you've lost it? Why don't we have the opportunity for somebody to go in and vote in person? We should restore voting in person as another option. Unfortunately, what you see is you see anybody that attempts to try to pursue that, even though they may have, like I do, a clear bipartisan voting record on this, of working on this. They try to smear this and try to say, oh, you think some conspiracy happened. Folks, I will always stand up for your right to vote. It's an individual liberty thing. You can guarantee I'll do it bipartisanly from both sides of the aisle to protect your rights. That's my record. 100%. Thank you.
I believe that mail-in ballots, and they've been proven to do so, have reached more of our neighbors than had access to vote before. Families who can't afford to take time off work, families who are shuttling kids back and forth to after-school activities, families who, frankly, just forget, who are not all as engaged as you on our democratic process, who don't always realize there's an election coming up until that ballot arrives in their mail, and they put it on the counter, and they pass that purple envelope over and over until they remember it's time to get it in. Mail-in ballots are about expanding democracy, and I'm grateful that Representative Young sponsored the bill to enfranchise more of our neighbors, to restore the right to vote to more of us. That is powerful and important work. But what he didn't mention when he said that he supports multiple options to vote is that he has sponsored legislation to repeal our access to mail-in voting, to restore only in-person voting. And what we have right now is both. We have voting centers where folks can go in person to vote, to register to vote same day or last minute and get a ballot and vote in person, where folks with disabilities can go and access an accessible voting machine that will read the ballot to them, that has Braille, lots of options. You can vote by mail or you can vote in person, and that is already the law in Washington. In fact, we've worked to increase voting centers across college campuses in the state, so more individuals will have access to a vote center close to them. I firmly believe that our access to democracy is one of our most fundamental rights, and that's why I've fought over and over to increase funding for paid postage for our ballots, to increase ballot box drop-box locations around the state, and to increase funding for our vote centers so that folks who need to can vote in person. You have all the opportunities in Washington, and our voting system is very secure.
I'd like to turn to education. We started the year learning that based on federal assessment, only 30% of our students met standard. Recent reports suggest that less than 50% met standards on state assessments in both math and English. Our educational system is in a crisis. What will you do about it? What have you done about it? And what are your plans to fix it?
Thank you. Now, the question for folks who didn't hear is what will we do to invest it or to fix the problems with the education system? Our students are not meeting national standards and our schools are struggling. I see this every day from conversations with classmates, with educators, with students, with my mom, who's a paraeducator at South Kitsap High School and has been for 20 years, with our union siblings. We have work to do to ensure that every student can thrive in our public education system. And I don't deny that these last few years have been really hard on students and educators and families of students who are trying to learn in an online or hybrid, challenging mode, and also dealing with this national trauma that we've all been experiencing together. We have work to do to make sure that schools are a safe place where students can thrive and where educators are supported. Now, I started applying a year or so ago to be an emergency substitute, because every district in our legislative district and across the state is having a hard time filling roles for teachers. Every single one. They're dealing with administrators stepping into the classroom to substitute, and we're looking for neighbors to help. I didn't end up substituting any classes, so not, in there trying to lobby your children or anything. But we do have huge unmet needs. And it's not just certificated teachers, it's also paraprofessionals like my mom. There are so many openings for adults who are there to help kids who are struggling. Kids on IEPs and who need special education support are just not able to get those wraparound services that they need to thrive. So one of my top goals going into next legislative session is to deal with our special ed funding formula, which is antiquated and has a cap, so that it doesn't matter how many students and what their needs are in your district, there's only a set amount of dollars that your district can get to support special education. We have more to do to make sure that all our kids are thriving, and I'm ready to keep fighting.
I really do appreciate the question on education. It is such an important issue that seems to be glossed over right now. Fact of the matter is that if we want to solve education, we will engage and encourage parents to engage in the education process with their children. That is the number one thing that I would pursue from an educational front. Regardless, statistics and stats have shown us that regardless of any type of demographic cross-tabulation form you want to look at, when you engage parents, regardless of income level, regardless of demographic, geographic differences, children test scores go up. We need to engage parents, and the system that we have right now in the state, especially what it's morphed into post-COVID, is not engaging parents. Parents need to be a part of the solution with children. That's why my number one priority in education is school choice. Parents deserve a choice. Children deserve a choice. And you know what? Teachers deserve a choice, too. Now, there's a role for our public education system, but we need to be allowing the dollars to start to follow the children so that parents have a real choice for how and where their kids are educated. If you do that, you will see the market respond with a variety of options for parents. Things that will compete on not just what they're taught, not only guaranteed and improved test scores for our children, the ability to compete. Folks, one of the reasons why I got in the office, I told you in front, had to do with my kids having an opportunity. I am one of the few Americans that still works in the IT service sector and high technology financial arena in the country. All of those jobs are going to foreign shore competitors, mostly out of India and China. The top IT institutes and engineering schools in the world are in India. And our kids cannot now, with our education system, compete in those jobs in the 21st century. You want those job opportunities for your kids? You want them to come back to these shores? You want to make sure that your kids graduate high school with the requisite knowledge to achieve in those areas? Send somebody back that knows those areas intimately and has learned to compete at those levels. And we will start that process by engaging parents, because parents want their kids to succeed. We all want our children to have a better outcome than what we were given in life. And it starts by including parents.
Thank you all very much.
John, can you use that mic, please? And stand in the center.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to thank the candidates for their responses to your questions. I know there's more questions out there. Perhaps the candidates would be willing to stay afterwards to answer those that we didn't have time to ask. But we've run out of time, and so now it's time for the candidates' closing statements. And we'll begin with Emily, and you will have 2 minutes, and the president will have 2 minutes.
Thank you again so much for being here, for asking the questions that so many of our neighbors have on their minds, for ensuring that we have a comprehensive discussion about your options, about what kind of future we're going to build together. I've been so proud to serve you and to work alongside our neighbors and my colleagues at Olympia to invest in an education system that serves all of our students, to ensure not only that our K through 12 system has the funding and support and opportunity that we need, but also that our higher education system is accessible to more students. And that doesn't just mean a 4-year degree for all kids. It means apprenticeship pathways and career and technical training. I worked this year on some really innovative policy that allows transition between our trades and our apprenticeships into associate's degrees that will transfer to bachelor's programs if someone decides down the line that that's for them. I did that work because I know personally that when my dad started as an apprentice at PSNS and then his knees told him he couldn't crawl around in the belly of a ship anymore, it was important that he had options. But at that time, he had 4 kids and he wasn't going to start back at the beginning of a college degree. We need opportunities for all of us to not just survive, but to thrive. To ensure that graduates of local schools are able to go on to good local jobs. To ensure that young people can afford to move out of their parents' homes if that's the right choice for them and find rent that's affordable. I hear every day from neighbors who are seeing $300, $400, $500 rent increases at the end of their leases. Folks who want to buy their first home but just can't afford it. We have work to do to expand affordable housing, to ensure that we're bringing good local jobs to the district through manufacturing incentives and ensuring that employers have the tools that they need. Those are the big fights ahead, and I'm ready to tackle them, right alongside each and every one of you. Thank you.
9 years I've served you, and I have fought for every one of you every day that I've been down in the legislature. And it is a fight down here. We have limited time to try to achieve things as a part-time legislature. And so I'd like to share with you a few of the accomplishments that I've achieved for you. Number one is health care options for veterans. Unanimously, bipartisanly sponsored, unanimously voted off the floor of the House this session. Our veterans that serve for us and put their lives on the line deserve greater health care options. I delivered that from the minority. How about greater funding and access to mental health? Folks, I'm giving you the list of accomplishments from the left side of the aisle that I've achieved for you. Again, bipartisanly sponsored this session and unanimously passed out of the legislature, bringing millions of dollars back into rural delivery of mental health dollars for our community. Folks, how about environment? In my time in office, we have passed the most substantive carbon reduction bill in the country. It was so successful that Governor Inslee used it in his national platform when he was running for president on how we could revitalize the environment, reduce carbon, and not raise your taxes at the same time. Now I can jump over to the other side. That, by the way, was unanimously, bipartisanly co-sponsored and unanimously passed out of the legislature. I've done that from the minority. At the same time, I have written you balanced budgets. I've delivered those without raising your taxes. That's what you can expect in the future. I have lowered your taxes, especially your property taxes. And I have lowered your energy costs instead of raising them. What are we going to do when our fixed income and low-income families have to start paying greater energy costs this winter because of her policies to raise the tax and the cost of fuel? We must stand up for our low income and our most vulnerable. And you need somebody that has a proven record that can go down to Olympia, work across the aisle, and deliver results. That's what I've done as your representative, and that's what I will do with your state senator. Thank you very much.
Okay, again, I would like to thank both of our candidates for being here this morning, and to all of you who are here. Hopefully we'll see you again next week.